Welcome back! Today we'll be stepping into the shoes of medieval knights and exploring what their lives were like. In the Middle Ages, knights were at the top of the social ladder. The secret lives of medieval knights were filled with mystery, intrigue, and adventure. From the outside, they were seen as chivalrous warriors, but their private lives were often far more complex and controversial. Some knights were truly a symbol of virtue, but others were ruthless killers, power-hungry, and criminals. They were often involved in the intrigues of the royal court and would sometimes use their military capability to seize power for themselves. Apart from being warriors, they were also landowners, diplomats, and administrators. In addition to their duties, they also had a busy social life. They attended jousts and tournaments, religious ceremonies, and festivals. They also would host feasts and other events at their castles. The life of a knight was not easy by any means. They were expected to be brave, loyal, and honorable. It was also required that they be physically fit and skilled in combat. Despite the hard work, the rewards to being a knight were great. Knights were usually rewarded with land, titles, and wealth. They also had the opportunity to make a name for themselves and be remembered for their deeds. Now let's dive in and learn about what knights were truly like. Becoming a knight. The process to becoming a knight began in early childhood, around the age of 7 to 8 years old, when a boy was sent to the Lord's household to begin his training. From the age of 7 to 14, the boy worked as a page, also known as a type of waiter and a servant to his elders. He would be taught knightly virtues and behavior, and battle tactics. When the page reached the age of 14, he would become a squire, the knight's personal servant. When old and knowledgeable enough, they would join the knight in battle. They were then knighted by their lord when the latter considered the training to be completed. This usually took place at the age of 21. They would get their official knight title through a ceremony known as the accolade. This was performed by the king or an overlord with a stroke, who would place the flat of the sword on the knight's neck or shoulder. After formally being knighted, knights would either serve or were hired by the mightier lords. Some knights owned land and castles, while others were landless and belonged to various military orders. However, rules were often broken, and some knights became involved in organized crime. Some knights refused to swear allegiance to a liege lord or military order. They were known as knight-errants because they would roam the land looking for adventures to prove their worth as knights. The laws of chivalry. The hidden aspects of medieval knights reveal a culture of violence, politics, and power that still echoes in our modern world. Richard Cooper, Professor of Medieval Studies. The laws of chivalry were a set of rules that governed the conduct of knights in medieval Europe. These laws were based on Christian ethics and the ideals of courtly love. The most important law of chivalry was to protect the weak and innocent. A knight was supposed to show bravery, strength, and skill in battle, as well as to respect women, defend the weak, and to be generous to others. The main chivalric duties were piety, honor, courtesy, chastity, and loyalty. In addition to these general laws, there were laws that governed the conduct of the knights in battle. Knights were expected to fight fairly and to show mercy to their enemies. These laws were put into place because at the time, there was military violence with huge civilian casualties. The law of chivalry was an effort to set ground rules for knightly behavior. Once in place, the knights were expected to not only have the strength and the skills to face combat in this violent time, but was also expected to temper their aggressive side with a chivalrous side to his nature. The laws of chivalry played a very important part in medieval society. They helped to promote the values of honor, courage, and justice in a time of great violence and death. The law of chivalry gradually declined towards the end of the Middle Ages. A day in the life of knights. The average daily life of a knight followed a similar schedule to that of the lord or noble he served. A day in the life of a knight was a long and arduous one. It began at dawn, with the knights being woken up by the castle's wake-up bell. The knight would quickly get ready and then head to the chapel for prayers. Afterwards, the knight would have a simple breakfast of bread, cheese, and ale. The knight would then attend to his duties, which included training with weapons, jousting, or inspecting the castle's defences. They would also spend some time with their squire. The knight would teach him how to fight, ride a horse, and behave like a knight. In the afternoon, they had a bit of freedom, which most knights would use to hunt or hawk. In the evening, he would dine with other knights and nobles in the castle's great hall. Afterwards, he would read, write letters, or pray. Knights slept in their full body armor, so he was always ready for battle. Some days, the knights would host tournaments called a melee, and a joust where a one-to-one mounted contest took place. These jousts taught knights to become battle-ready by giving them realistic challenges. On the day of the tournament, there was a stand for noble and royal guests located near the jousting track. The knights and maids dressed in their best clothes and would parade for their distinguished guests. The guest of honor would make an announcement. Then trumpets marked the beginning of the tournament. These events took place in large fields and were enclosed by fences. In early tournaments, the knights were very aggressive, which resulted in many injuries and deaths. But that changed in the later tournaments. Due to the code of chivalry in place, the number of deaths lowered significantly. Knights were encouraged to capture opposing knights. Once captured, a knight would have to pay a ransom to get his horse and armor back. Weirdly, it was the captured knight that decided the price. After the events had ended, great lords would cite who the best fighter was in the melee, and the winner would be awarded with a prize, such as a weapon or even a bear. Emotional struggles of being a knight. Medieval knights were not immune to PTSD like we see with modern soldiers. They were often malnourished and sleep-deprived, sleeping on the ground, exposed to potential enemies. Their lives were about up-close hand-to-hand combat. They would watch their friends die and have to kill other men as part of their job description. Modern psychologists have looked at ancient texts to find that knights would struggle with despair, powerlessness, fear, and delusions. These feelings were modern symptoms of PTSD, which is often found in soldiers of today. Thomas Hebel-Holm, a medieval historian at the University of Copenhagen, researched ancient texts, with one of them being written by a 14th century French knight named Geoffroy de Charny. Charny was also a diplomat and trusted advisor to King John II. Charny wrote, "In this profession, one has to endure heat, hunger and hard work, to sleep little and often to keep watch, and to be exhausted and to sleep uncomfortably on the ground, only to be abruptly awakened. And you will be powerless to change the situation. You will often be afraid when you see your enemies coming towards you with lowered lances to run you through and with drawn swords to cut you down. Bolts and arrows come at you and you do not know how best to protect yourself. You see people killing each other, fleeing, dying, and being taken prisoner, and you see the bodies of your dead friends lying before you. But your horse is not dead, and by its vigorous speed you can escape in dishonor. But if you stay, you will win eternal honor. Is he not a great martyr who puts himself to such work?" Love and family life of knights. Many believe that medieval knights were single and solitary, that they were solely devoted to their many duties. History shows that many knights had romantic relationships and secret love affairs. An excellent reference to this is the story of Lancelot and Lady Guinevere. Guinevere was married to King Arthur, and when he found out about their extramarital affair, he ordered that she be burned at the stake. Sir Lancelot found out about this and attempted to rescue her. He failed, but in the end, this did save her life, as she was instead sent to become a nun. He ended his days as a hermit. Knights were encouraged to be married, but these men, full of testosterone, often had mistresses. Despite the fact the church frowned upon this, it was common for knights to engage in extramarital affairs. They were expected to be good husbands and fathers. They would have close relationships with their own mother and father and be providers for their families. Social status was an essential part of a knight's life, and a good family life was a reflection of the person they were. What knights would do for fun? Knights would have hobbies, which often included hunting. This was a good way for them to wind down and help them to further develop warfare skills. Knights were often interested in music and arts. Some even had a romantic side and would compose poetry. Others would perform in plays. They were also said to play board games like chess to expand their mental abilities. These well-balanced medieval men were not just strong in the body, but also strong in the mind. To stay alive, they would need to develop critical strategic thinking. Being a knight was all-consuming, but they also had lives outside of the fighting and attending high society functions. They would love and were family-oriented. They were artistic, intelligent gentlemen in many ways. Thanks for watching another show of History's Weirdest. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Cheers!